Hello, welcome to TechWebDots. Today I am going to discuss another exciting service of Azure, which is Azure Static Web Apps. And this is the session for beginners only, and I will discuss why we should use Azure, what are the benefits of using Azure, and what Azure Static Web Apps can do for us in terms of deployment, development, and what are the key features. So let's get started without wasting time. So let's go by key points first, or you can see the definition which is provided by Microsoft. Azure Static Web Apps is a service that automatically builds and deploys full stack web apps to Azure from a code repo. As you can see in this figure, we have some code changes on our Visual Studio Code, and if you are using Azure DevOps repo or GitHub repo, and with the help of GitHub Action or Azure DevOps pipeline, we can automate this thing so our content will be deployed to Azure Static Web Apps, and where we can get the static content and an Azure API, or you can say the Azure HTTP trigger that we can use. And if you have your own API as well, that you can also use with static web app. But this is the very beginning, so let's understand more about static web app. When you create a static web app resource, Azure interacts directly with GitHub or Azure DevOps to monitor a branch of your choice. Every time you push, commit, or accept a pull request into the watched branch, a build automatically runs and your app and API deploys to Azure. So how cool is this, right? So if there is a proper setup, we can definitely leverage from both the worlds. One, it is Azure resource, another is Azure DevOps. Static web apps are commonly built using libraries and web frameworks like Angular, React, Vue, or Blazor, so where server-side rendering is not required. These apps include HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and images assets that makes up the application. With a traditional approach, with a traditional web server, these assets are served from a single server alongside any required API endpoint. But with a static web app, static assets are separated from traditional web server and are instead served from point geographically distributed around the world. It means whatever is your static content, that will be distributed geographically so that our end user can get the content much faster, or you can say it is supporting low latency. So this distribution makes serving files much faster as files are physically closer to end users. In addition, API endpoints are hosted using a serverless architecture, which avoids the need for a full backend server altogether. If you want to do some server-side processing, so that can happen with the help of this API HTTP trigger, or you can say this API endpoint, right? We will learn more what more we can develop with API, but you can use your own as well. So I hope now you have a basic idea what Azure Static Web App is. But let's go through some key things, right? So what are the key features of this static web app? Why it is getting so much traction day by day? So one important thing is web hosting for static content like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and images, right? Another important is integrated API support provided by Azure Functions with an option to link an existing Azure Function app using a standard account. So for example, if you are already using Azure Function app for your API need, so you can also connect that with this Azure Static Web App as well. First class GitHub and Azure DevOps integration. It means this static web app covers every scenario that you can think of with GitHub or Azure DevOps integration that allows repository changes to trigger, build, and deployment. Globally distribution static content, as I said earlier, so putting content closer to your users definitely give them low latency and they can use your content in much faster way. Free SSL certificate it provides to all your app that you host, right? how many number of apps that you can deploy within a static web app, we will discuss just after a few seconds. So which are automatically renewed, so you don't need to worry about free SSL certificates. Custom domains to provide branded customization to your app. So yes, you can also associate your custom domain with these static web apps very easily. I will go through all these things in my practical session that will be next. But before jump into the practical session, so I strongly believe these important points are very uh, make sense, so that you can understand while we are creating that app and while I will showing to you how practically we will deploy our changes to static web app. So seamless security model is there with a reverse proxy when calling API, which requires no cross origin source sharing configuration. So you can think of one, our static content is there. Second, our API is also hosted. So you must be thinking there must be course configuration required. So you don't need to worry about, everything will be sorted by Azure itself. So there's no need to worry about that as well. So it is also providing authentication provider integration with Azure Active Directory, GitHub and Twitter. So you can use that level of authentication and integration as well if you are using this Azure web app. Another one is customizable authorization and role definition. So you can also define the roles as well as we generally use with our application, what role is assigned to perform what. So even that feature is also there. Another one is back-end routing rules. So enabling full control over the content and the routes you serve. So the moment you decide the route, okay, this file will be served through web request, this content will be served through web browser. So everything you can manage, either get request is allowed, either post request is allowed. So it is completely customizable. Generating a staging version powered by a pull request, enabling preview version of your site before publishing. So it is giving another, or you can say the pre-pod version, or it's a staging version where you can take the sign up from your client. Okay, your app is ready and now you can perform anything on that app, and then you can go to production. And the last not the least, so CLI support is also available through the Azure CLI to create resources, or you can say cloud resources, via the Azure Static Web App CLI for local environment. So that is also completely possible. Okay, so let's move ahead. So overall, what Azure Static Web Apps can do for you? So they can build modern web applications with JavaScript framework and libraries like Angular, React, Vue or Blazor. There are more, but we will discuss in our next session. To create WebAssembly applications with the Azure Functions backend. So this is completely possible. So we can public a static website framework like SWA, Hugo or ViewPress, right? And we can deploy web application with frameworks like Next.js and Nuxt.js. So you can see this is a block diagram that generally looks what Azure Static Web Apps can contain. So we will be having code changes, we will be having pipeline, either it is GitHub or Azure DevOps. And I'm going to use Azure DevOps completely because in my recent session I explained to you what is Azure DevOps. So now we will use the power of both the worlds, Azure DevOps and Azure Services. And Azure Service will contain your static content, images, code and API that will be your Azure function. Okay. So another important part is its pricing, what actually you can get in terms of pricing. So if you have this free subscription, so under that you can create 2 apps within a static web app and there will be no cost, but there are some restrictions. Like you can have the content only 0.25 GB per app and Azure function will be managed, right? There will be no SLA in free subscription, so you can test it for your hobby, for your personal project, how it's working for you, and if it's suitable then definitely you can go ahead with this. And it is super fast and I strongly recommend you to explore it, or you can explore along with me in my next session. So we have a standard subscription as well where the cost will be around 8.310 euro per app and per month. And there is a bandwidth of 100 GB, which is same as free tier. And there are 5 apps that you can use within static web app. And again, SSL is free, and we have SLA as well. And if you use enterprise grade edge, then you need to pay more, which is 16.17. So I will give you the link where you can have all the information related to pricing as well in the description of this video. Okay, so I hope the basic is very much clear for you regarding Azure Static Web App, and I will see you in the next video where I will perform all the things practically, like what are the prerequisites that you need on your system to start building Azure Static Web App, and what are the key challenges that you will face during development of it. So till then, bye bye, and don't forget to provide your feedback, and that's the only inspiration, and thumbs up. So I will create more such videos, and I will see you in the next video. Till then, bye bye.